Hello everyone and welcome back to cAPTives. My name is Wendy Grace. This four-part series created by Act to Prevent Trafficking, or APT, is designed to create a conversation in your classrooms, your homes and your communities about the issue of human trafficking. In our first episode, Understanding Human Trafficking, we got an appreciation of the global scale of human trafficking, which really is modern-day slavery. In this episode, under the title of Preventing Human Trafficking and Supporting Victims, we're going to hear about the work of An Garda Síochána. We're delighted to be joined by Deputy Commissioner Anne-Marie Cagney and Detective Superintendent Derek Maguire. Again, they'll be joined by APT members Sister Geraldine McCarthy and Anne Kelleher. You're going to hear about the various types of exploitation that human trafficking leads to, what pushes and pulls people to become victims of human trafficking, and what can be done to rescue them.
I'm delighted to get the opportunity to talk to you today about my work in An Garda Síochána in supporting communities and victims impacted by the crime of human trafficking. Trafficking in human beings is the most harmful crime and is a gross violation of the human rights of any individual. Back in 2009, the Garda Commissioner established the Human Trafficking Investigation and Coordination Unit, and to this day, they are based in the Garda National Protective Services Bureau in Harcourt Square.
As Anne said, I'm Detective Superintendent Derek Maguire from the Garda National Protective Services Bureau, and part of my remit is the Human Trafficking Investigation and Coordination Unit, and I also have responsibility for the Organised Prostitution Investigation Unit. So what is human trafficking really? And human trafficking involves the deception, the threats or physical force to move a victim from one place to another in order to exploit them. And this whole thing about human trafficking is exploitation, it really is. In the case of children, there's no force is required. The very act of transporting a child in exploitative conditions constitutes human trafficking in itself. I just have a short video here that might test your observational skills, which is self-explanatory, so I hope you can watch the video and clearly enjoy it, and you'll be surprised at the end of it.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
So to sum up on that video, I suppose it's easy to say that it's easy to miss something you're not looking for. And as we often say in our job, human trafficking can often be hidden in plain sight. So it's about being observational around this.
So what we see in An Garda Síochána is we see a number of industries where trafficking in human beings is most common. We see it in pimped control prostitution, that's brothels and escort services, hostess clubs, and what we call fake massage businesses. We also see it in domestic work, servants, some restaurants, some agricultural areas and some factories. And we see it, believe it or not, where there's a demand for cheap labour, the likes of petrol stations, car washes, and even when you get your nails done. That's the industries in which we see trafficking in human beings. A recent trend we've seen in our country, unfortunately, is where we see people being trafficked for the purposes of forced marriages. That's really, really difficult for us to investigate because, unfortunately, sometimes these human beings are forced into a forced marriage by their parents or by relatives. And that's what makes it very difficult for us.
And then we also have forced criminality. It's another form of exploitation that a lot of people mightn't be aware of, such as forcing a victim to participate in criminal activities We've often found people that are forced into working in cannabis grow houses or selling drugs on the street, selling heroin on the streets of Ireland. And they're being forced to do that to feed their own habit. And we also have, it's not so prevalent in Ireland, but it is a part of trafficking and exploitation, is organ removal. This is subjecting the victims to organ removal without the free, informed and specific consent of that person. And we've often seen in Europe, they call it the lover boy phenomenon, where a young unsuspecting female might be in a relationship with a male, might think that they're in a great loving relationship, where all the while he's exploiting her and he's with the prospect of deceiving her and bring her to a country where she's being trafficked effectively. She might know, or a lot of victims don't know that they're being trafficked, which is a terrible phenomenon. And then why is this done? Why is it done? Well, it's, as I said, it's for sexual exploitation, for labour, forced begging, removal of organs, or forced to commit crime. And then we look at as well as how victims become victims. There's the push factors and there's the pull factors we often talk about. So the push factors are, why are they pushed out of their country of origin, their own country? And they could be various reasons. We have poverty, we have conflict, lack of education, lack of opportunities, lack of freedoms, forced marriages, or a fear of violence. They push people out of the country, their own countries. And the pull factors would say for Ireland or other European countries would be opportunity, money, freedom, education, healthcare, responsibility, and opportunities for their own children as well. So the push-pull factors are also aspects of trafficking.
In An Garda Síochána, we have established an organised prostitution investigation unit. And you might think that's all about investigating. Well, actually, a lot of our work in that area is victim-centric, and it provides a centre of investigative excellence to monitor Ireland's off-street prostitution industry. It focuses on protecting the most vulnerable and providing welfare for persons engaged in the sex trade. And it also allows us to investigate those who sexually exploit potential victims of human trafficking. Indeed, as part of the Santa Marta group, we in An Garda Síochána are very fortunate to work with Pope Francis himself. This is a partnership of worldwide police forces, the clergy, the state and society. And we provide a collaborative response to victims of human trafficking. Each and every member of that group are passionate about their work in addressing global slavery. It's very important that we as members of An Garda Síochána have the right response and that society has a full understanding of the impacts of human trafficking on victims and their families. Can you imagine the isolation, the fear and the desolation that victims are facing, notwithstanding the added coercion and psychological trauma that they are enduring? Indeed, I recall the first time that I went to work at the Garda National Protective Services Bureau. I didn't fully understand the nature and extent of human trafficking even at that stage. Oh, I'd heard about it. I didn't fully comprehend the full impact that these crimes had on human beings. But I can assure you, it was very distressing for me to see the extent to which human beings can treat each other to make money. What I found most shocking is that some victims didn't even have the capacity to understand that they themselves were victims, that they expected to be treated this way. Remember, behind every data statistics that you hear on human trafficking is a man or a woman or a boy or a girl. And they're suffering trauma, intimidation, and violence in a culture where they are afraid to speak out. They're afraid to bring attention to themselves for fear of retribution on their families, their communities, and even themselves. Indeed, in some cases, victims don't even understand, as I've explained, that they are victims of human trafficking, and that makes them very complex cases to deal with. Can you imagine what it's like to come from a country where there's a lot of poverty, deprivation and hardship, with dreams of a better life, only to end up living in modern-day slavery? working in industries for very little or no pay. Many women and girls, and indeed men, are trafficked for sexual exploitation. And trust me, these are the most vulnerable persons in our society. Would you believe that sometimes, even when a victim is rescued, they go back to working in that industry because they know no better. And in their world, that's the only skill that they have. Many victims of human trafficking go unidentified and unsupported. Yet trafficked victims are the most vulnerable members of our society. Many victims do recover and do go on to live very successful lives. And I have witnessed that transformation of some victims of human trafficking who have gone on to lead very successful and happy lives in their destination countries. But please remember that the numbers of victims who do report to An Garda Síochána are still very low and that their voices are still silent. We must do everything in our power to empower victims to report their traffickers and to trust in the system. And it's hard to trust in the system because it's very challenging work and it's very difficult to get cases throughout the criminal justice process. And over my time in An Garda Síochána, I've been reduced to tears on many occasions in my engagement with victims of human trafficking. In many cases, they are the silent voice calling out for help for a long number of years, silently crying when painting somebody else's nails, silently crying out when they're washing somebody's car, or silently crying out for help when they're minding somebody's children. And that's why you hear the term hidden in plain sight, because we are passing victims of human trafficking in our streets every day, yet we're not recognising their suffering and harm.
Just another short video we have here, short advertisement that was sent out on British TV maybe 10 years ago. It can be hard-hitting and at times, but it just shows you how close human trafficking can be to you, and it's in the communities out there, so just to bear that in mind.
Yeah, I was thinking about Mum. Come here, Mum. Yeah, so I'm a dad smart. I'm wearing this really, really nice pink dress. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I've got to go because my battery's going.
Vera, vă jugați powięcej Sony Theater.
Bye, Mum. Love ya.
Bye, love.
Mwah. And then tell me about it. Oh, you're good after school. Well, I don't know. I've got my coursework to do and stuff. But
We must remember this is not all about being brought from America or Europe or South America to Ireland. You can be trafficked from one county to another within Ireland, and that is trafficking if you are being coerced or controlled. So human trafficking in Ireland is run by sophisticated organised crime groups. Principally, they're from Eastern European, and this is from our own investigations, China, Eastern Asia, Africa, South America. These organised crime groups, they hire out the trafficked persons to farmers as slaves. They force men, women and children into prostitution, into committing criminal acts, or setting up grow houses, cannabis grow houses. So anytime you see someone smoking cannabis or taking cannabis, you have to think, where did this come from and how was it all produced and cultivated? And a lot of the time, there's victims of trafficking behind that. So you have to bear that in mind anytime you're offered drugs, and particularly cannabis. There's a bigger picture to this, and there's a human element to it as well. The profits that these organised crime groups make are huge. They're all controlled by the traffickers. All the money is taken from them. The victims are kept in very poor conditions, receive no pay, and they're locked away with no freedoms as well. Human trafficking occurs in every county in Ireland. It's not just Dublin, it's not just Cork, it's not in the big cities, it's every county, every small village, every small town. And the map, which I'll just show you here, just shows every place that we've investigated human trafficking. And there's stars there, nearly every county covered in the 32 counties. And bear in mind that the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, there is no distinction with organised crime gangs between the north and south of Ireland. It's just the island of Ireland, and it's prevalent the whole country.
So I ask each and every one of you to take personal responsibility, to do your part, to eradicate the crime of human trafficking, and to bring victims safely beyond the reach of traffickers to start a new life. We can do this by creating an awareness of human trafficking, by recognising that it exists as a global crime, and by recognising that we have traffickers and victims here in Ireland. Please don't ever turn a blind eye to the terrible lives that are being endured by these people. And you might ask, what can I do? I ask you to open your eyes to human trafficking. Human trafficking is a very, very serious crime. People are being used as commodities. And Irish people can be victims of human trafficking. So we all have a duty to play our part to tackle this heinous crime.
That's basically it. I just want to mention, Anne, if I could, the Blue Blindfold campaign, which I think you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. So Blue Blindfold is it's a website that's set up by the Department of Justice in collaboration with An Garda Síochána, and it allows people to anonymously report suspects of human trafficking and incidents of human trafficking. They can report it anonymously or not, but it's a function, and you can be sure that if you report it to the Blue Blindfold website, you will receive a response from us. And it's Blue Blindfold, all one word, at garda.ie. Or indeed, if Crime Stoppers number is very important, if you don't fancy sending an email, you can telephone the Crime Stoppers line on 1-800-250025. 1-800-250025. So that's effectively my presentation, Anne, and I hope that clarified some of the issues that we deal with in relation to human trafficking and the investigations that accrue from it. Thank you.
Anne-Marie, thank you so much. That was very informative, very challenging, quite horrifying, to tell you the truth, to hear the extent to which this human trafficking exists in our small country. Just a few questions of interest to me. How do some of these victims get into the country in the first place? Because I would understand that the majority are probably not Irish nationals.
And that's a particular challenge for us, Geraldine. And I think that's why it's important that our members are trained correctly in identifying and looking for signs associated with trafficking. You know, and again, what we train our members to do is to understand that if you see, you know, a particular man and a young girl together, just ask yourself that additional question. Does that seem right? Is that a father-daughter relationship? Or is there something that you should be concerned about in that area? And then not to be afraid to ask that question, not to be afraid to look at their documentation, and just to satisfy yourself as to the veracity of the nature of travel, you know, because I always say to our members, you know, you'll never get into trouble for asking a question, but certainly if you can rescue somebody and prevent exploitation at all, then it's a job well done, you know. So it's important, you know, and the training needs to be delivered in such a manner that those signs of trafficking form a huge part of the learnings for young members particularly, because not a lot of our young people fully understand the crime of human trafficking, but particularly sexual exploitation. And I think it's very, very important that we get that understanding broadened out to the communities as well.
One of the elements that struck me as well as you were speaking was that phrase, hidden in plain sight.
Yes.
It's a phrase that trips off our lips, really. You know, we often talk about things hidden in plain sight, but for our target audience, our young people, 16, 17, 18 years of age, how alert can they possibly be to the possibilities of people engaged in illicit work, the trafficking, grow housing, begging, drug running. How can they possibly be?
Well,
aware?
it's just to be aware of it. It's to be, if something doesn't seem right, it usually isn't. You look at that video that I showed you, the second video there of that poor girl in England, the English, and the other girl getting ready for school and her school uniform and everything. That shows you how close trafficking can be to you. And I'm not trying to make people nervous or anything like that, but it's just to raise awareness that it is out there and that you have a responsibility to as people and society, to report it and take care of people. If you think look, if there's nothing in it, you're not losing anything by reporting it or speaking up about it. You're not losing anything. But please bring it to the attention of your parents, your family, your school teachers, or indeed An Garda Síochána, and it will be investigated, I can assure you that. But just make sure you don't, if you think there's something wrong, please tell someone.
Go with the hunch.
Go with the hunch, yes.
Times.
The other thing that shattered me was victims expecting to be treated this way. Isn't that an appalling thing to think? That any human being would think it's okay that I'm badly treated. It's okay that somebody is profiting by me.
What's particularly traumatic is that people are very vulnerable. So if you're coming from a country where you have little or no income, you don't have an ability to support your family, any kind of an income, despite the circumstances in your destination country, can be seen as a better life. And what's very, very sad, and what I found very distressing over the years, is when I've recovered some victims of human trafficking, they're quite annoyed with you for rescuing them because they have no source of income to send home to their families. And it's only when you can put the supports in place and get the supports from our fabulous non-government organisations to provide support to those victims, it's only then do they understand the true nature of how they were trafficked, and they have a chance to turn their lives around at that stage. So that's one of the challenges.
Yes.
And that's why you have to understand, and I think for anybody to be able to work in this industry and support victims needs to understand that nuance, because it's not a personal choice. You know, and I think a lot of us are very fortunate to have an income and to have food on our tables every day. That doesn't come naturally to a lot of victims of human trafficking.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Geraldine.
you.
And it's genuinely my pleasure to support APT in this project and indeed in any future projects. It's a great opportunity to create an awareness and to try and deal with this particular crime together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One of the things that struck me when you were speaking about the push and pull factors, and I know, you know, we hope that our students who will be watching these episodes of these series will take further, you know, the content and pursue elements of the content, and one being push and pull factors behind human trafficking. The pull factor, the extent you mentioned about job advertisements and they being attractive, and somebody who's trusting and thinking, you know, that they're going to get the promise of a good job.
Yeah.
What would be your advice, you know, in relation to your experience of this across all countries now, in relation to young people who might think, gosh, there's a job, great, a golden opportunity. In my age group, we would be thinking, if it's too good to be true, then it is too good to be true if it looks it. So what would you advise me?
You're 100% there, and it is a case of do your research. Do your research. Where did this advertisement come from? What platform was it up on? Is it a reputable platform, or is it something that, you know, you can do? We have social media and everything at our fingertips, and particularly the younger people, and they can check everything that they need to. Make a phone call. Ring any phone numbers that are there. You'll know straight away if this is a reputable organisation or not. You can, if it's indeed in another country, make a phone call to the local police over there and ask them about this. If something doesn't seem right, it usually isn't. And if it seems too good to be true, it may not be a good thing to get into. So just do your research and make your inquiries.
Okay, sound advice for all of us, regardless of what age group. Thank you very much, Derek. Appreciate
you're more
you
than
being
welcome.
with us.
Delighted to be here.
In particular, we appreciate all the work that's being done by An Garda Síochána and your colleagues overseas, but in particular our own Garda Síochána here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne.
Thanks again to all our guests today. It's always sad to hear about the victims of human trafficking and how trapped they can become. We hope that this will spark a conversation in your classroom and in your homes about the issue. Again, you can make use of the worksheets that accompany the series. It's clear that the Gardaí need our help, and we'll end the episode with reminders of how you can contact them. In our next episode of cAPTives, we're going to look at how we can protect children from human trafficking and some of the dangers around the hospitality sector. We look forward to you joining us again.